I would like to introduce our speaker, Rebecca Latta. Rebecca Latta, we have known for a very long time. She used to be the president of the chapter and newsletter editor. Her more recent credentials are she's an ISA certified arborist. She founded Rebecca Latta Consulting in 2003 and has been the principal arborist. She holds a degree in environmental studies from UC Santa Barbara and attended classes in landscape architecture at UCLA Extension. She has been an arborist certified by the International Society of Arboriculture since 1998 and is additionally certified for nesting birds, wetlands evaluation, and tree risk assessment. She has worked as a consulting arborist, biologist, water manager, and horticultural consultant since 1990 in both the public and private sectors in Southern California. She works with complex multi-agency projects that promote land stewardship through sustainable practices. She's well known in our circles. Originally from Altadena, with family still in the area, she is passionate about tree preservation and restoration of native plants, tree canopy, and the related ecosystem services after the Eaton fire. She served on the board of the California Urban Forest Council, Inland Urban Forest Council, San Gabriel Mountains chapter of the California Native Plant Society, which I mentioned, and Los Angeles County Woodland Habitat Conservation Strategic Alliance. This is a mouthful. and she is currently serving on the board of the Southern California Horticultural Society. Welcome, Rebecca.
Good evening and hello to everyone on Zoom as well. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Oh, hold it up. Okay, sorry, I'm not used to this. Okay, so we started this effort with Altadena Green about 2 weeks after the fire because we were notified by arborists in Lahaina and from the campfire that we needed to mobilize and do something or we would lose a lot of trees. So that's the reason we started this group. There's 5 of us, actually 6 totally now. That photograph you see on the screen there is a picture of the group of arborists who trained about 3 weeks ago. So we did a training to teach local arborists how to do post-fire tree recovery surveys. So let me go on here. It's not 40. Here? No.
Click anywhere on the screen and then start. Oh.
Sorry, we're waiting. I'll keep going here. So we had about 30 people at the training, which was nice. So this is just an overview. I'm sorry, it looks like the screen truncated the presentation word there, sorry. This is the overview of what I'm going to talk about tonight, our mission and goals for Altadena Green, the findings that we had from our efforts, debris removal challenges, some discussion of the canopy that we find in Altadena and what trees we saw there, impacts to native trees that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 months, and our needs and recommendations for recovery. Aha, there we go. Yeah, for some reason, the whole screen is squeezed. Sorry about that. It's not, the formatting is going to be weird. I apologize. So our mission is basically to restore the character, heritage, and culture of the tree canopy in Altadena. And specific goals included reducing removals of trees that might otherwise recover from fire damage. And that was a really big deal because we started seeing trees that were marked for removal that we felt shouldn't be marked for removal. And we made a fuss about it because we really felt strongly that those trees might recover with a little TLC. And then also we needed to educate homeowners about how to protect trees that they did save from construction damage during the debris removal phase and also during the construction phase of their new homes. And then some additional information about post-fire restoration and for the trees and protecting habitat for nesting birds, which might include cavities or holes that could have been created during the fire. So sort of an integrated approach to how we wanted to talk to homeowners and also to contractors about saving trees. We made some big inroads. We got a lot of really good press at the beginning. We still are getting good press. U.S. Army Corps has been great. They've worked with us. When we've had concerns, they've addressed them. I feel like they were very responsive when we had concerns. We have had issues, but they've worked to resolve them. They have provided with the county a waiver that people can sign if they want to keep trees. And that was a really big deal. Then we've done the resources and education for tree fire and recovery. We have provided some pro bono and low cost tree recovery surveys for the first 8 weeks. We are still waiting for funding, so we're not doing pro bono surveys at this time. We are doing low cost surveys at this time. And there is a list of arborists on our website. So if you go to altadenagreen.org, and actually I have it later in the program, you can see the list of arborists there that are doing surveys in the area. I thought this was telling. We felt strongly that it was important to keep the trees from ending up being stumps, and I like the fact that I'll read it for the Zoom folks if they can't see it. Sometimes I think the surest sign that intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe is that none of it has tried to contact us. That's one of my father's pictures from the 7th. I think he was on Allen and Meadowbrook looking towards the mountains, and it was terrifying. So that was really an urban conflagration that was an uncontrolled fire that went through that populated area. And it was high winds. We had 100-mile-an-hour winds. For those of you that weren't here for it, it was terrifying. And that's just showing a little bit more of what happened. And at one point, there was a map that showed which houses had burned and which houses had not burned. And this is a big version of that map. The fire did burn objects that were most flammable. I have seen incredible damage to trees that had any kind of fiberglass underneath them. We've also seen plastic trash cans burn, and this one is a plastic trash can with mulch inside. The mulch didn't burn. The plastic trash can did burn. And I'll give credit to one of our partners, Rhonda Wood, who took this picture. And she also took this picture. So plants within 5 feet of the structures were often heavily damaged. Some things were not, but we're seeing a lot of the worst damage at 5 feet from structures. But in some cases, trees shielded homes and structures from fire. And in this case, I don't know how easy it is for you to see, but the whole back of the canopy burned, but the front did not. And the back of the canopy is facing east, and the wind was coming from the west and the north. So that tree actually caught embers and stopped them from burning the structure that was below it. For some reason, we're cutting off the bottom of the screen a little. I'm sorry. these trees basically caught embers, and that's the homeowner there who came out to talk with the group of arborists that was doing this survey. I wasn't actually there for this one, but they had determined that the reason that house is still standing there on the right-hand side was because the trees caught embers and stopped them before they reached the house. And there's another example on the left there where an oak tree caught embers. Sorry.
Like drinking water.
Like drinking water, okay. And also that the only thing that really burned there was the wooden fence and the picture on the right. This is a map that shows the direction the wind was coming. And the house that you just looked at is the house that's shown in the circle there. And that's mature trees with green canopy. And those trees apparently buffered the house and caught embers to prevent that house from catching on fire. And then you can see the houses that were saved. So you see the map where it shows the houses that are burned, and then the houses that are shielded by the trees that caught the embers are still there. Oh, that was a tree that burned. This is the kind of sentiment we had in Altadena. And this was just one of the many signs that I took pictures of, but I thought this one was definitely one of the better ones. Some of them were significantly snarkier than this. This has been a very difficult thing for arborists to navigate, and also for the U.S. Army Corps and local officials to navigate, because it's a complicated decision about which trees are removed. If the tree is within the ash footprint, which is considered to be 3 feet from the back edge of the structure that burned, then it's possible that when they're doing the demolition work of the foundation, they're going to damage either the roots or the tree itself. So some of those trees will have to be called for removal, depending on whether they're taking the foundation and what they're doing. And then in some cases, the trees were assessed in the wintertime, in January and February, before they emerged from dormancy. And I think that if the arborists didn't know tree species that well, which may have been an issue, they would have called it for removal thinking it was dead, even though it was just dormant. We do ask the homeowners some hard questions about whether they're willing to wait and see if the tree recovers, and to see if they're willing to water and do restoration pruning on those trees over time, because that will be required. These trees will be needing additional maintenance for many years to come. Most of the clients that we're dealing with are willing to put in that extra time and energy. We're hoping we can find resources to offset the cost of that, but that's going to be something that's going to be developed in the next 2 or 3 months. This is an example of what it looks like after they've cleared a lot, the before on the left and the afters on the right. It's pretty stark to have all the trees taken off the property, but that particular oak tree was pretty much toast. They needed to take it. It was, as you can see, right in the middle of that structure. This is from the Army Corps. This is their list of what a hazardous tree is, their description of what kind of trees they're trying to take. They would say that they want to take trees that are within the fall zone of the house. Sometimes we argue that a tree could be pruned instead of removed, and so we go around on that a little bit. And sometimes the homeowner will need to prune the tree before they have any work done on the property, because it'll be in the way of the construction to remove and rebuild. Same thing here. These are all posted on our website, altadenagreen.org. So when we had our conversations with the Army Corps, they changed their stance and added the brown dot and the yellow dot with ribbon. So if someone decides they want to keep a tree, they can sign a waiver, and then they will put brown dots over the blue, and they will tie a yellow ribbon on the tree. And so far, for the most part, this works. And the contractors understand what's going on. The people removing the trees at this point in time are Edison, the contractor for Army Corps, the contractor who comes in after debris removal was usually a tree removal contractor, and private contractors. And then on the right, that is the green fungus of death. If you find that on the tree, that means the tree's in deep trouble. We've seen quite a bit of it. Trees that are badly scorched. This was a probably a Chinese elm. There's sugars and starches in the growing layer of the tree, and these fungus seem to colonize the tissue very quickly. So actually, Chris Sjogren from UC Cooperative Extension, who we're working with, is studying this with some of his other research folks to determine what these funguses are, and they're quite beautiful, actually. I have several pictures in here. So this is an example of what we were seeing. This coast live oak was marked for removal. I saw it, screeched to a halt, got out of my car, and thankfully it was by the road, so I didn't need permission to go on the property. I could just see it from the roadway. And so we reported it, and they pulled the orange tape off of it by the next day and had removed the blue dots with brown paint. And so this tree has been saved. So we do it one tree at a time, and we're figuring we were able to save around 300 trees at this point total between what we personally looked at and what homeowners did on their own. There's several other arborists working out there besides me as well. So that's just a rough guess. For instance, this removal tree, or this redwood tree was marked for removal right across the street from my parents' house. And it was coming back quickly and seemed to be doing all right. The canopy's actually restored quite a bit. And so we also had this one unmarked. The homeowner signed a waiver, and the tree is going to be still there. So any tree that might be removed would be marked with this blue paint and a barcode. And then trees with the white on them, that was just during the initial hazardous materials removal, and it doesn't mean they're going to take the tree down. It's just them telling their people there might be a hazard there. The orange tape and the blue dots is the thing that determines whether they take the tree down. LA County Regional Planning is advising people to keep trees for a period of 2 years after the fire. And they're clear that trees can resprout, oak trees. This is just for oak trees. And they have a whole process in place. There's a waiver in case a tree has been damaged that they can apply for if they want to try to take a tree down that was damaged in the fire. So they don't leave them with no options, but they do require a professional look at the tree, and they do require people to wait. Then this is the tree waiver option that I was describing earlier, where they can sign something to say, hey, we'd like to keep these trees. So in the process of doing all this, I looked on Select Tree, which is it's a program run by the Cal State system, and you can look and see what they've inventoried in your area. And in this case, Altadena had been inventoried, I think with LiDAR and some ground truthing, and they had 222 species, 132 genera, and about 14,000 trees in the inventory. I created my own list for Altadena, which you can find if you go to my lists on the top right-hand corner of Select Tree. You can find it there. I may not have every single tree in there. So if any of you know of trees that aren't on that list, either pre-fire or post-fire, I would like to know. Locally native trees, I counted about 23 species that I had put on my list. that are native to the area, locally native, and 7 species that are native to California that might be, you know, Catalina Island or the desert or Northern California. And like I said, there's my email address for anybody that wants it. I am looking for contributions to that list because I don't think it's complete. And then I just want to go through real quickly. Most of you, I'm sure, probably know these, but I'll go down the list of the most common ones. Coast live oak, canyon oak, California sycamore, incense cedar, which seems to be coming back nicely, actually. Coastal redwood, which is also coming back nicely. So those are the most common ones we're seeing in the fire zone. If you have specific questions about fire effects on trees, it turns out that the USDA has quite a bit of information on their website for specific species. The only one I wasn't really able to get good information on was Western sycamore. For some reason, they only list Arizona. So just to give you an example of the research I found there is coast live oak seedlings. Small trees were often killed in moderate to severity fires. Large trees have a very high survival rate, and that's actually what we're seeing in the field. The times when we're seeing trees really have trouble is when there was something underneath them that burned, like a structure or a lot of other plants. And one whole half of the tree will be charred beyond recognition, and the other side is fine. We see quite a bit of that, and we're curious to see how that plays out in the future. So we intend to monitor trees over the next year to 2 years to see how they recover. Torrey pine, there are several of them on up in Altadena off of Altapine over by the Avison School. And we're also hoping to monitor those because we understand that Torrey pines are not well adapted to fire, but these are massive 50-inch trees. And they seem to have some cambium layer still going. So we're keeping an eye on them, and the homeowner is willing to work with us. So I'm curious to see how those do. They did have scorch on one side, but they're still canopy, they're still green, and the cambium layer is still alive. Western sycamore, like I said, is not listed in the FEIS database, but they seem to have sort of varied tolerance to fire. We do notice that when they're scorched really badly, sometimes that ends up being a big pocket of decay. So the jury's not out on that one. We are watching several large ones that homeowners want to keep. I'm not sure where that's going to go.
I've seen a lot of sycamores that burn, and they even burn out through the inside. Get large hollow branches, still keep growing. The branches become homes for barn owls and things. They seem to really tolerate a lot of fire, a lot of damage, and still survive really well.
That wouldn't surprise me, but I'm curious to see. Some of these trees are pretty badly burned, so I'm watching a bunch of them that are up off Mount Curve to see what happens. This is pretty common for what we were seeing. That's on Mariposa. The underneath of the canopy scorched because there were plants underneath it and a fence, and the top is okay. The lower trunk is moderately scorched, but not severely scorched, and I think these trees are going to come back. This was like 2 weeks ago. Those pictures were taken. So the kind of effects we're seeing on trees are direct effects where there's either heat damage on the foliage and the foliage is still there, or the foliage is completely consumed. Scorch damage under the branches because the structure burned. Point source heat on the trunk. In other words, you have a pile of wood sitting next to the tree, it burns, and the backside of the tree has a bad scorch mark on it, but the rest of the tree is fine. Chimneys where you have heartwood decay or some sort of internal decay where the ember stuck to the side of the tree and then went up and made a chimney. during the fire, and I have a good picture of it. And often that's pre-existing dead wood or pre-existing defects in the trees, and then they burn. The other thing that happens during the fire is there's soil damage. And we're seeing quite a lot of hydrophobic soils where the fire got really hot in the western part of town. And in some of those cases, the homeowners are having difficulty getting the soils to take water so they can water the trees. And then there were some damage to upper layers of soil and fine roots. But interestingly, in some cases, there's some evidence that trees shift carbohydrates and foliar potassium concentrations around to strengthen, to restore leaf area and strengthen the stem. So that was in pine. I haven't seen anything for oak, but I'm hopeful that there will be more studies about this sort of thing so that we can understand how trees react. I think the lesson learned from this study that I read was that you absolutely need to not disturb the soil, because all of those roots are sitting in that burned layer. So it's really important to not let people walk across those areas, to stay out of them, to fence them off, to protect them as much as you can. The other concerns we've had are that beetles will attack the trees even if we manage to keep them. So monitoring for larvae and other things is important. And that fungal pathogens like the one I showed you earlier would attack damaged wood, which we're definitely seeing. And if half the tree is gone, that you might need to protect the remaining live branches from sunburn. And then that we're having trouble getting water on things because people's water systems have been damaged so badly, or there isn't water in some cases. So here's some photographs of our findings. That's what I call alligator bark on a coast live oak. It got burned pretty badly, but the cambium layer underneath is still alive. So our goal when we're looking at trees is to find a live cambium layer. The picture on the left was a tree I just looked at yesterday. And the top of the tree's been burned, but the cambium layer is there, and there's shoots all over the top of the tree. It's coming back. The other tree had more significant scorch on it, but the previous arborist had not gotten down to the cambium layer. They had just peeled the bark off. So I actually ran that other little bit there with my chisel and found that the tissue underneath was still alive, and you could put your finger on it and it's still wet. So that tree had more damage on it, but I still think it's going to come back. I also wanted to mention that we have examples of what trees do after they've been burned. I took pictures of these coast live oak that burned in the station fire. And you can see that there was pretty significant damage on that tree on the left. The whole front side of it was scorched, and looks like the bark burned off and down to the heartwood, to the below the bark. But it's got a roll of live wood and it's coming back, and you can see the tree on the picture, same tree picture on the right, that it's recovered. There were two more trees downslope from the tree you were seeing in the previous slide. And you can see that these trees actually lost bark as well, and they're putting on new bark. We saw that at Eaton Canyon as well. The oak trees there lost bark and then put on new bark down the road after they'd grown for 5 or 10 years.
On the trail there that looked like a piece of plywood with holes in it.
Yes.
They lived for the longest time.
Yeah, they're incredibly resilient. So yeah, I encourage people to not give up on the trees too soon, to give them a chance to recover, even though it may take time. That's the chimney. That tree had decay, had multiple same-size branches and decay at the base. And so the fire got into the decay, burned the junction, the big branch fell off, but you can see where the fire burned through the middle of it. This is typical scorch damage. I would consider this light to moderate scorch damage. These trees were scorched on one side. The moderate scorch damage will often cause the bark to contract and be thinner. My understanding of severe scorch damage, at least the definition we're currently using, is that it has to go all the way down to below the bark layer. We're also seeing some bleeding on trees that had pretty bad heat damage, even though there's not direct scorch on them. They definitely got very hot. And we're not sure how they're going to react to this over time, but I think that the resins are an indication that the tree is trying to protect itself. So we're keeping an eye on these trees, making a note of where we see it. We are seeing a lot of sprouting, especially after the rains we had. That's quite encouraging, both at the base of trees and along the trunks. The lower and upper canopies of trees, we're seeing quite a bit of sprouting. And at this point, if I'm not seeing any sprouting at all, I start to get concerned. But I'm still willing to give trees a chance and try to get water on them if we don't see it. This is one of my clients, actually. It's an overhead shot of her tree, and it's a huge tree. It's 60 inches in diameter. It's massive. The before and after picture, taken by Google right after the fire, you can see the tree was hit pretty hard. That's a picture of the tree in March. It lost quite a lot of foliage, and there were some pretty big heat stress cracks in the trunk. This was a codominant tree. That was a pre-existing condition. The fire actually got inside of there and burned inside the trunk, but not badly, but a little bit. But you can definitely stick something inside of it. So we asked to strap this tree or to try to hold it together to keep it from falling apart, which the client did. There was quite a lot of this cracking on the trunk, and you can see it has a U-shaped joint, but it's still got some problems. This picture she sent me on the 20th of April, and it's sprouting foliage all over the place in the upper canopy, and she has been watering it. So that was kind of exciting to see. I don't think this picture shows the straps, but she also took some weight off of the tree because we were concerned about it splitting open. So that's a success story where we weren't sure that one was going to come back. It was scorched pretty bad and it came around. I have a lot of examples of crown sprouting on coastal redwood, on elderberry, on lemonade berry. A lot of native things are coming back from sprouts, and we're seeing it and tracking it all over the place. I have a client with a coastal redwood tree that was severely scorched that I wasn't sure was going to make it. And he gives me regular updates and I check on it. And I'm actually kind of amazed at how well it's doing. He is watering it. And I do think that makes a difference. Another client with alder trees that got burned really badly because they had plant material at the base. And this particular, these trees are located in a wash. So they lost most of them in the first, they actually took many of them down before the flood because they were trying to prevent them from blocking the channel and causing flooding, but they were very badly burned in the fire. How do I come out of that? Wait, I got it. Okay. Whoop. So I noticed in white alder that this was a very hot fire, the way it came through. This was in the Pasadena Glen, caused the trees to bleed. And these trees were completely dead. So white alder is not resilient to fire, not at all. This particular California sycamore was badly scorched. This is one of the ones I'm watching, and I don't know how it's going to come around, but we have seen decay form where there's been damage like this, but to Ty's point, that'll probably be a place where there's room for nesting birds and other things. So we'll keep an eye on that one. The other thing we saw from the fire is this unleashing of dry ravel and flood materials. And so it's important to be aware of that if you're working with trees that have been burned and slopes that are nearby that have been burned. I was pretty shocked at how much soil and material came down the glen when we had the flood right after the fire. It was shocking. So the CMPS actually published a really nice guide to post-fire recovery. And I don't necessarily need to go through all the specific details here, but minimizing foot traffic was at the top of the list here, to try to make sure that you aren't disturbing the soil. And then I like to wait until I'm sure what part of the tree is alive and what part of the tree is dead before recommending pruning. I know people are anxious to take the dead off. I actually believe that in some cases, particularly over the hot summer, some of that dead material provides shade, even though there's no leaf mass on it. I prefer to leave the dead as long as it's not threatening a structure or is not in a place where it has a target where it could hurt something. I try to convince clients to leave the dead there for the time being. And also at the moment, there's nesting birds all over Altadena, and they are utilizing trees even with dead in them. So I think it's important, at least for now, to leave as many trees as can be left for that purpose. I also recommend against doing a lot of planting. Right now, I'm not convinced that hydroseeding is a good idea either. I understand if you have a patch of bare dirt where they've just cleared the house, you'll need to do something to keep the dust from blowing. They're using sterile oats in the mix if people let them. I suppose you could also put some local wildflower seeds or deerweed or something in there if you wanted. But in terms of hydroseeding large areas for slope stability, there's a lot of studies that indicate that's not a good idea, that it just encourages non-natives and discourages the plants that would already be coming back. Because when you have a fire, it activates the seed bank that's already in the soil. So you really want to try to encourage the native stuff that's there. Pull the non-native weeds right now. This is the time. And then down the road, maybe next year, see if there's an opportunity if you wanted to seed something, but you may not have to, depending on what's already there. I think I covered some of that. Smaller trees got hit. So if the holding roots aren't burned, that's the other thing we look for when we're out doing survey work. Even if the top of the tree looks okay and it's not badly scorched, if the holding roots were burned, then we have to investigate whether the tree needs advanced decay detection, like ground penetrating radar, or some other form of testing to determine if their root system is intact and the tree can continue to stand. And in some cases, you do need a certified arborist or someone who has training, like a registered professional forester, to do those assessments because they're pretty detailed and technical. This is just a list of resources for anyone that wants them. There's a lot of discussion about mulches, particularly with insurance companies right now. And there's a lot of evidence that very thick layers of mulch might be a problem, but thinner layers may not be. And a lot of conflicting information in the scientific community about it. But my personal opinion is that a small layer of mulch is a good thing to protect soil from heat and to buffer toxins in the soil, and also to encourage new root growth. So I'm not willing to abandon mulches at this point in time. You might want to keep mulch away from the very base of the tree and avoid the use of filter fabric, which burns fabulously. especially if it's made out of anything with plastic in it. So I am very much against weed barriers or plastic, but just straight mulch on the ground, let it go. And we did see a lot of evidence that where there was weed barrier, it burned hotter and faster and up to the base of plants because it had been pinned up to it. So the survivability of trees that we're looking at, there's not a lot of great data out there to help us because fire damaged trees in urban settings haven't been all that terribly well studied. So we're breaking some new ground here a little bit. And that information hopefully can be used to inform people in areas that haven't burned, which might be a lot of you, and help you navigate the minefield in your own yards and figure out what you would like to do. What I can tell you is reducing the amount of things you have under your trees and pushing vegetation away from the trunks is important. So planting right up to the base of any tree is probably not a good idea, especially for trees with thin bark. Like Parkinsonia, the Desert Museum, I've seen several of them with plants right up to the base and the bark's pretty thin. They didn't make it. Desert willow also didn't make it when there was a lot of plant material up to the base of the tree. So when you're looking at your own yard and what you have planted there, it's really important to keep stuff lower, pull it back away from the trunks, keep the mulch away from the base of the trunk. That's very important. The size of the tree makes a big difference when you're talking about survivability in a fire. Bigger trees have more resources. Smaller trees, oaks included, got killed. In some cases, we're seeing oaks 4 to 6 inches are crown sprouting, which is better than nothing, I guess. Thin bark trees like maples and willows got nailed. They look pretty bad. Some of them are crown sprouting, a lot of them aren't. Question?
There's a question from online. People are being told to scrape off contaminated soil. How does that affect surviving trees?
That's a loaded question. Thank you, Zoom people. Yes, it does affect trees. I'm sorry, for the Zoom audience, the question was about scraping the soil because it's got toxics in it up to 6 inches, as we're understanding. My opinion about that is make sure you test the soil before you scrape anything to make sure you actually have toxins in the soil. In some cases you may, depends on where you're located. There are some resources on the Altadena Green website to test for lead. There are some testing organizations that are looking for more than just lead. Loyola Marymount had a study, but I don't know if it's possible to still get into it, that's testing for more. I think it's important to not scrape the soil unless you're sure there's something there that you have to take. Some minerals don't move around in the soil, and if you don't take them, they're not leaving. Other things may be flushed through the soil with water. I am not an expert in this area, but I can tell you it's complicated. If you have to take the top 6 inches, you are likely damaging the entire root system of your tree in order to do that. So it's a big decision. Some people are opting to take trees out so they can scrape the whole property if they really thought they had toxins in the soil. It's a difficult decision that needs to be made by each individual homeowner based on their own information from their specific property. Sorry. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about assessing injuries from cambium injuries. In short, if the tree is thin barked, there's more likely to be injury to the growing layer. If the tree is thick barked, there's less likely to be injury to the cambium layer or the growing layer of the tree. And you should check the growing layer of the tree before making a final decision about removing it, because if the growing layer is still there and intact, on enough of the circumference of the tree, it may be worth trying to keep it if the tree's in a location where it can be tolerated so that it's not going to drop something on people or cars or whatever you're trying to do. And this is just a stem section showing bark and the growing layer and the cambium layer. So you saw in that picture that I showed earlier that the first arborist had only pulled the bark off and had not really found the cambium layer. So I went looking for it and found it. And in an oak tree, it's pretty far down. You got to dig for it. This is a picture from Chris Sjogren from Cooperative Extension showing the difference between live growing layer and a dead growing layer. The one on the right-hand side has significant damage and it's dead, completely dead. The one on the left is still alive. The other thing is if you're going to do it, make sure it's a nice clean chisel and don't leave it all messed up like that. So we have a lot of conversations about the difference between a tree that survives and a tree that can recover. We have a lot of trees that may survive that may not be able to fully recover over time and restore canopy. So when we're talking to homeowners, we have this discussion with them because they may have to do a lot to the tree to bring it back to the point where it can be a contributing member of their yard with shade and things. So there's a lot of decisions to be made. And the other thing is how close is it to the structure and how close is it to other things that might impact it. And we talk about what further actions might be required. For instance, here we have a tree, this is a deodar. You can see there was a cavity from the ground. It turns out that cavity is big enough to put a person in. It's huge. So some trees catch embers in a decay point and that burns back into the tree. And if you have that situation, that tree is fully dangerous. It's about to drop its top on something. So some of these trees are really fully hazardous and do need to come down. So the recovery of the tree depends on a lot of things, but basically our experience has been if the tree has a live cambium layer and you have the resources to do some of these things, you have a good chance of bringing trees back to the point where they may contribute to the shade and habitat in your yard. The availability of water and the application of water over time in the hot season is going to be critical. And we're working with the water agencies right now to try to figure out how to work with them and get resources to homeowners so they can water the trees. We're also going to help monitor these trees for future pruning needs. The weather's going to be a big factor, and we're hoping that we don't have a super hot summer. We've had a really nice wet spring, and that's helped us a tremendous amount, and we're grateful for it. There's another really nice little short guide. I'm not going to read it out to you, but that has a lot of tips about what you can do after fire and what kind of resources you can look for to save fire damaged trees from the Britain Fund by the International Society of Arboriculture. That's our research arm. They put this out right after the fire. Tree protection during construction is also critical to protect your root zone, and you want to go to at least the edge of the drip line. I prefer outside of that, even 5 to 10 feet outside of the edge of the drip line to protect all of the fine roots. Because if you think about it, the drip line of the tree at the edge of the canopy is where the water comes down. And so it's going to spread in all directions 5 to 10 feet. That's where all your feeder roots are. So that's the area you want to protect. And that's honestly, in all cases, including construction preservation for just building a house or driveway or doing anything, you want to protect the tree outside of that zone. Most cities don't require that you go that far. But in my experience, that's where you need to protect the tree to keep your leaf mass, to keep the tree from suffering from compaction and other problems down the road. And chain link fencing is my favorite. Orange fencing always gets moved. K-rail is not a bad idea if you haven't. Stops those bulldozers right away. Tree protection, like I said, fencing outside of the drip line or at the edge of work if possible. Chain link is my preference because if it's installed in the ground, it's difficult to move. Don't let them use fence panels. They always get moved. And then informing tree contractors of the protection measures and making sure that they are clear and understand what you expect. Because a lot of times, if it doesn't get communicated to the people on the ground that are doing the work, it doesn't happen. We're also getting some reports of water theft. So if people are installing water systems to water their trees, they're recommending they put in a locking source or a quick coupler, which you can take in and out so that people can't take water from an installed hose bib next to a meter. Because a lot of people have lost their entire irrigation systems. They were melted, they were plastic, a lot of them. So they would need to install a hose bib right next to the meter with a shutoff. So that's been the advice from the water companies, is to make sure you have a locking system. And then the other thing is, because the soils are hydrophobic, which means they repel water, you need to start watering very slowly or the water will just run off. So it's important to start with a sprinkle and then build up from there once the soil starts actually taking water. And I've come to the end. Altadena loves its trees, and we have a tremendous amount of support from the local community for this effort, including Altadena Town Council and the Amigo de los Rios and Cheney Trail Association. We have an amazing group of folks, and they have really worked with us to help make this effort successful. We're moving from the recovery phase of trying to look at trees in the field to trying to find ways to get water to people and more into the care and maintenance. And we're starting to look at landscape efforts and partnering up with other groups. But if anybody has any questions, I think I have a few minutes still.
It's a question online. Somebody's asking what they can do to support your work.
We just recently partnered up with C, and I'm gonna forget the acronym. I don't remember what it stands for, I'm sorry. But we can now take donations online. And we just put up the link on our website for donations.
One of the early slides, you showed an aerial of structures that were protected by a number of different trees.
Mm-hmm.
What were the species of those trees?
It was varied. There were,
Can you repeat the question?
oh, she had, I'm sorry, there was a question about what species of trees were in that group of trees that protected the houses. There were quite a few coast live oaks in there, but also some pines, including Canary Island pine, which also comes back nicely from fire, strangely enough. So it was a combination of mostly evergreen species. Over here.
If you've never watered your oak trees and the fire went through your yard, under all these oak trees, killed a bunch of the leaves and the toyons and stuff that were underneath them, should I start watering them now?
You can check your soil moisture. I'm sorry, the question was, should she water since the understory was burned underneath the tree, but the tree is not, oak tree has not been watered in the past, supplementally. The answer is it depends on how much moisture is currently in the soil. We've had some rain. If you poke and prod a little bit and see if there is moisture there, then you might be able to wait a few weeks, but I would keep an eye on it. If it's currently dry, I would recommend the light sprinkle approach, but stay away from the trunk. at least 5 to 10 feet. You want to water towards the edge of the drip line and the whole thing. I'm a big fan of the old fashioned flip-flop sprinkler, but there's also a guide to installing a different kind of standalone sprinkler that can be hooked to a hose bib on our website that Wynn Wilson put up.
And would you continue to water through the summer when?
I
we're
would.
Talking about.
So
you
the
know,
the question was, would you keep watering through the summer? With a big caveat that if we have those monsoonal heat waves, that you would not want to water during that time, but probably once a month and away from the trunk, and a cycle soak. So a cycle soak is you deep water and you water multiple times in one day to push the water down in the soil, so that you're getting, 12 to 18 inches. You're basically, think of it like a reservoir. You water to fill that reservoir in the soil. And then as the weather dries out, the top of the soil dries out, you don't want to water until the top 2 or 3 inches are dried out, so that the tree has a chance to exchange gases and do the things it needs to do. But because your soil has been changed by the fire, my feeling is that you need to have some water there to continue to restore roots where you can.
Similar to that, would you want to add mulch in places where there had been natural leaf litter and other things, and it's now been burned?
That's a good question. I probably would, but I might make sure. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, should I add mulch in an area where there's been fire burning? And the answer is, I probably would, but I would keep it away from the trunk, and I would keep it in the 2 to 3 inch range, and make sure that it was chipped pretty small. For more than one reason, beetle also can breed in big chips. So smaller chips is better if you can find them. I know that there's a chip drop. I think it's just, the website is just chip drop, but they drop a very large pile of chips and you would have to move them yourself. Or you can talk to local tree contractors, but make sure that their chips are, they have a sharpened chipper and the chips are small, which can be a challenge sometimes. But I would not reject eucalyptus or pine chips either. Just that they're small and that it's a fairly thin layer. Mostly that's for heat protection. So if you've lost your canopy and the ground is exposed to sunlight, I think you're going to have heat gain as a result. So that's why I think it's important to have chips down. And chips can also act like a sponge and soak up moisture and hold it over time. There was a question.
You really only mentioned one Chinese elm in your presentation, just a little bit, if you could talk about what you've learned from this fire process of Chinese elm, ficus, other non-native trees, so what their relationship with the fire was and the relationship with the residents. It's a good time, to take them out and how they burned and things like that.
Okay, so the question is, what about non-native species like Chinese elm and ficus? How did they fare in the fire? And is this a good time to maybe take them out and replace them with natives? That's all the slides I pulled out. Chinese elm is thin barked and does not fare well. Although if it's just strictly heat damage, sometimes they'll come back sprouting in the center of the tree, but I haven't seen Chinese elm fare very well. One of the trees I see the green fungus of death on pretty regularly is Chinese elm. Ficus as well. Ficus is thin barked, also same problem. I'm seeing them not fare well. Japanese maple is not faring well. So it might be the time to encourage people to plant things that are going to recover after a fire in the long term, either to crown sprout, like lemonade berry and sugar bush and all of those other wonderful natives that come back, or that can be resilient to fire with thick bark. Cork oaks we saw do pretty well. Their bark's pretty thick. I've seen some that were really badly scorched that are sprouting like mad. It was kind of exciting to see that. But a lot of other, and eucalyptus come back. A lot of them, not all of them.
There's a question online, how do deodar cedars do post-fire?
Okay, so how do deodar cedars do post-fire? And the answer to that question is it's all over the place. It really depends on if there was a structure underneath them. Apparently in their native environment, they do tolerate low and moderate severity fires, but not high. So some trees we're seeing come back. Some trees that were fully scorched on one side by a structure are not faring all that terribly well. But we're keeping an eye on a few that are restoring okay. A lot of them came down before we even had a chance to try to rescue them because they were close to power lines. They lost a lot of them on Fair Oaks, North Fair Oaks. We saw a lot of them come down. We weren't sure whether they were going to live or not, but we did get a chance to see them. So the answer to that question is it varies depending on how much damage. I've seen some fully scorched deodars that are definitely not going to come back. I've seen some lightly and moderately scorched deodars that have foliage on them that I think might make it, but they're going to have to be watered and they're going to need some TLC.
There's one more question online. Person is wondering about ways to encourage property owners to become more active in looking out for signs of pests or diseases. I know it can be a little overwhelming when people are new to it. Do you have any thoughts? And then we need to wrap up here.
I do. So thoughts about monitoring for pests and watching for beetle. I think we're going to try to put some things up on the website. There's also a fantastic guide that was published a few years ago. Phytosphere research, that is the list of insects and diseases that hit coast live oak. And then I can post that one online. It's fully comprehensive. It's really nice. And then there are others that are published by USDA and other research groups about how to look for insect and disease issues in pines. That's pretty well studied. Sycamores and other species, native species, are less well studied. I would say if you see frass, which is, droppings like termites would make, you watch for signs of insects, boring holes, frass, insect activity, larva activity, and just pay attention to what's going on. You might be able to deal with it. Okay.
Well, thank you so much. Great applause to Rebecca.